It's nearly 500 years since Henry VIII's flagship, the Mary Rose, sank during a battle in the Solent. Now, 30 years after it was raised from the seabed, it has a new home in a purpose-built £35 million museum. With the help of a reconstruction, visitors will get a snapshot of Tudor life at sea. Robert Hall is in Portsmouth, where the official opening of the museum is about to start. Robert.
George, you join us live here in the historic dockyard, moments away from this very important ceremony for the port and for the city. How appropriate it should be taking place here, just a few yards from the site where the Mary Rose was built and launched. Now, the journey that's brought her here has taken a very long time. It's involved hundreds of people, painstaking work stretching back over decades, and a great deal of money. But this has all been about remembering the crew of the Mary Rose and drawing this generation into their lives, teaching us more about them through the technology now available to us. And perhaps, as was the case on that moment back in the 80s when she was raised from the seabed, this is a moment for the team and their supporters to savour the moment.
There is the wreck of the Mary Rose. It has come to the surface.
The 11th of October 1982, the day the Mary Rose came home.
A wonderful moment. You hear all the sirens.
Henry VIII had watched his flagship founder during a battle with the French. Only 25 of her 400-strong crew survived. This month, after decades of round-the-clock treatment, the sprays of water and preservative were turned off, and the Mary Rose was ready for a new chapter in her story.
This is a momentous occasion for the Mary Rose. We've been spraying for over 30 years. So many people involved in the project have contributed over the years, and it's a really exciting thing to see.
In the decade since the Mary Rose was raised from the seabed, she's remained alongside HMS Victory, sealed in a plastic tent and sprayed with water and preservative chemicals. The challenge facing the architects was how to build this 21st century museum around the Mary Rose whilst maintaining that environment and protecting the ancient dock, which has become her home. A home which places the recovered starboard side of the hull alongside a reconstruction of the port side, packed with the cannon, cargo and possessions which offer a perfect snapshot of Tudor life.
I'm staggered. Never have so many wonderful Tudor things ever been brought together before. You come in and I just feel that I'm like Carter at the tomb of Tutankhamun.
At Southsea Castle, overlooking the wreck site, archers saluted the crew members who drew the great longbows recovered from the seabed. Advances in technology mean we can now meet one of those men face to face.
I think it will astonish people who aren't perhaps aware of how much that great ship yielded up.
Once this was a dead ship, an incomplete jigsaw, but no more. The Mary Rose has been reborn. George, this is a great detective story leading from this, the cannon that identified the ship, to all of these thousands of objects. These, for example, tell us a lot about the surgeon. These items here tell us about the master gunner. They lead us to the people, and of course they found remains of some of those people as well. So at last we've got faces. You saw one in that report, and one other set of remains I need to show you, because they have to be the star of the show. Welcome to the ship's dog.
This is an exciting view of the Mary Rose that we haven't seen before. She's always been shrouded in a mist, but now those grey ducts are pumping out hot air to dry her over the next few years. It's when you walk around the museum do you get that Mary Rose experience of what it might have been like to be on this Tudor warship. 415 crew were on board when she went down. Around about only 35 of them survived. But what we have here is a substantial number of the 19,000 artefacts that have been brought up from the seabed. This is one of the cannons on board the Mary Rose. She was one of the biggest and most heavily armed of the ships in Henry VIII's fleet. And if you look down here on the gun deck, you see this etching on the glass. Well, it represents the anti-boarding netting. This would have prevented the French from coming on board, but sadly it also trapped the men as the Mary Rose sank. Now, a little later, we'll find out more about what life was like on board this ship. On the day the Mary Rose sank, Henry VIII's England was in turmoil. It was a national crisis as bad as the Spanish Armada. This sweeping image behind me here captures that moment in time. It's the Cowdray engraving, and it's one of the first things you'll see when you come to the museum. But what is the story behind it? Chrissy Sturt has been finding out.
The reason historians know as much as they do about the fateful day that the Mary Rose sank is because of the existence of this picture. It was commissioned by Sir Anthony Browne, an important and wealthy Tudor nobleman in the inner circle of Henry VIII. Sir Anthony had it painted onto the wall of his dining room so he could dramatically retell his exploits on the battlefield. Sir Anthony's grand house at Cowdray in West Sussex later burnt down and the painting was lost in the devastating fire. Fortunately, it had previously been copied in minute detail, and that engraving survives today. Henry VIII came here to Southsea Castle to watch the battle with his own eyes. He would have witnessed as his state-of-the-art ship, the Mary Rose, loaded with armaments, expensive cannon and nearly 500 men, suddenly keeled over and sank within a matter of seconds. What we also know from the Cowdray engraving is that on the Isle of Wight there was more bad news. French soldiers had successfully landed.
Thank you very much. Now you come here, and we're back here in the new Mary Rose Museum. And this is so many of the artefacts that we've been talking about. This is just a few of them. This is all about defending the ship. We've got the pikes there, we've got swords, we've got daggers. These are some of the blocks, of course, which was part of the rigging of the Mary Rose. And so it goes on. Well, there's one man here who knows this period in history better than perhaps many, many other people, and that's Dr. David Starkey, historian. Thank you so much for being here with us. I know that you have been quoted as saying the Mary Rose is the English Pompeii, preserved by water rather than fire. It's like stepping into a Holbein painting.
Well, we're in a Holbein. It is the most extraordinary museum. It seems to me it's as though you take the tomb of Tutankhamun, Herculaneum, Pompeii, and you put them all together. And here we are. We're surrounded by everything on board a ship of that 16th of July, 1545. All life, all death, everything here.
And what does it tell us? I mean, it tells us more about Tudor life, doesn't it? What we're discovering with the Mary Rose.
Yes, but you know, you're being too rational. Emote, respond. I mean, look at this. That is a pulley. You will find that on your bike nowadays. That is the tackle that will be on a very typical yacht nowadays. That is a ship's chain. It looks just like a ship's chain. They are real. They were us. And too much history is about argument. To begin with, you have to feel. You've got to recognise their common humanity. And this museum, I'm going to just say, it does it better than anywhere else, anywhere.
And that's very interesting what you say, because I've been, you know, walking around here for a few days now, having a look at all these spectacular artefacts.
And spectacular people.
Yeah,
you can even
yes,
see the people.
Yeah, but I've heard people say, who are walking around having a look, saying, that cannot be real. Right. And I think you do have to pinch yourself to say 500 years old.
Everything is real. You were talking about weapons. We've got on another floor, we've actually got the bows, the bow staves, these wonderful pieces of yew. You look at them, it's as though the carpenter had just finished with the adze shaping them. You can see the grain, the colour of the wood. There's a little velvet cap, a coif, and you know, you can still feel the pile of the velvet.
How did it, I mean, what did it mean at that time to a nation to lose the Mary Rose, and indeed to Henry VIII?
Do you know, I don't think he greatly cared. The poor woman who was the wife of the captain and the vice-admiral, Lady Carew, was standing next to him. And he said, more or less, there, dear, these things happen in war, I'll find you another husband. I mean, nowadays, it would be an absolute catastrophe, because we've got about 3 ships. Then he got a decent fleet, and he took the view, you know, war, win some, lose some. And he was winning the war, so you lost a ship.
And very briefly, I mean, how do you think she sank?
How do you think? My guess is probably that the bosun was drunk and forgot to close the actual the gun ports. And you know, you tack sharply. Remember, she's fighting something the English were not used to: galleys, rowboats, which are the equivalent of fast, unpredictable boats. What do? You make a sudden manoeuvre and then plop.
Dr. David Starkey, thank you so much. It's fascinating to talk to you, and thank you very much for being with us. Well, I've been having a bit more of a look around inside this incredible museum at some of the, well, artifacts that tell the stories of what life was like on board for the crew. Imagine being the cook on board the Mary Rose in the bowels of the ship with a cauldron full of bubbling broth. And this is the second cauldron, which was found under a pile of rubble on the seabed. Everything you see here, including the bricks, are original. In fact, everything in the museum is real, and sometimes that's hard to believe. She was probably carrying supplies for 2 weeks when she sank. This trough here, possibly for making bread, a tankard for a gallon of beer, wooden plates for the crew members, and each one would make their mark so they could identify their own bowl. And if you fancy it, become an archer and try out one of these longbows. You've got to be strong. These are some of the smallest artifacts, dice, which give us an insight into how the crew would have spent their leisure time. And then there are these boxwood rosaries. Given the religious upheaval during Henry VIII's reign, it just shows that some of the crew were still following the Catholic Church. This is the Crow's Nest, the mast top. Great view from here to see the weather, which is timely because Alexis is with us tonight. And what was the weather like, Alexis, on the day that the Mary Rose went down?
Well, Sally, the 19th of July was a Thursday, very like today. During the morning and the early afternoon, the winds were really light. The English fleet were motionless off Portsmouth. The French galleys launched an attack. But during the afternoon, the winds picked up, the breeze picked up, and the Mary Rose made its move coupled with the tides. And the result of that is in the museum.
Alexis, thank you very much. Well, you might think that the story of the Mary Rose, the journey is over, but it certainly isn't, as we've been hearing on this programme. There's the drying of the ship, which will go on for the next few years. There's the identifying of many more objects, which are not in this museum, but hopefully will be in this museum. And then there's the long-term project, the possibility of diving the wreck once again to bring more of the hull up and the bow section possibly. But from us all here, a very good night.